For the ceiling and walls of the shop, I'll be using 7/16 oriented strand board. I bought a stack of these OSB boards and elevated the topmost board on 3 2x4s before I cut the holes for the electrical boxes. I cut this hole around a 1/4 inch larger than I needed to give me some room for error. A large hole saw would have worked here as well, or a jigsaw for that matter. I prefer the oscillating saw as I can make plunge cuts that are straight and close to the shape of the electrical box. I decided on OSB over drywall for both ceiling and walls of this shop. I've installed and mudded enough drywall in the past to know I don't like it and that I'm not very good at it. Plus, OSB is strong and can take a screw almost anywhere you need one. This first 4-foot by 8-foot panel was laid out for the southeast corner of the ceiling. To lift the panels into place, I bought a tilting drywall hoist. It was on sale, and owning instead of renting gave me flexibility to work on this project when I had time. My cost, with delivery, was only $200, and for the trouble it would save me, it was quite a deal. After setting the first panel on the lift and cranking it up to the ceiling, I realized I had a problem I didn't anticipate. The shed was more out of square than I thought, and this first panel was not going to fit neatly into the corner as I hoped. And it's this first panel that's most important, as all the following ones run off of it. Now, this is also my fault, as I should have checked the squareness, or lack of the ceiling and snapped a chalk line as reference, to find the best compromise and to sort of hide the fact that the room is not square. And to be fair, I don't think the builder of this shed had any intention of finishing the ceiling, so it's up to me to adapt. So I started with a new panel and decided to reference the edge of the beam that runs through the middle of the shed, and then I would have my fill pieces that would taper running down the outside walls. This prevents having just a sliver of a wedge for a fill, or having the corners of the OSB panels not meeting, which would be even more noticeable. So running off the beam worked better. I marked a straight line 4 feet off the beam as my reference and got to work marking, cutting, and lifting panels into place, then running screws into the ceiling joists. This is the first panel going up on the west side of the beam. Against the far north wall, I tacked on some 2x4s to help hold the edge of the ceiling panel. I was working around the rails of the roll-up door, so the panel was hanging off the far edge of the lift. The biggest challenge was working in this small, crowded space. I had all my benches and tools on wheels, but having to constantly move stuff to get the lift in position was a real drag. I was doing this project in the winter, so putting everything outside wasn't an option. Ideally, working in an empty room would be best, but just not practical here. And after installing a few full sheets, it felt like a treat to be able to lift these small end fill pieces by hand. I used round head self-drilling cabinet screws on these panels. They hold well, and I wasn't concerned about hiding the screw heads anyways. For this half panel, the door rail actually helped support it while I got it into position and ran in some screws. I tapped in nails around the edges to space the panels, and this will allow for any expansion and contraction with the seasons. Even though it's awkward in tight and crowded spaces like mine, the more I used the hoist, the more I appreciated how well it worked, and how difficult this job would be without it, especially working by myself. Once I got this panel on the hoist, and spun around the right way, you can see it still takes some time fiddling to line it up and have it land just in the right spot. And I had to retract one of the arms to move it further under the door track, and I was just hoping my hole cutout measurements were accurate and the electrical boxes would line up. And this panel just cleared the cable pulleys without me having to rip it down. A final tap with a hammer sets this one right. When I had all the ceiling panels up, I used a flexible latex caulk to fill the cracks. Once in a while a chip of the OSB would come off, but I just caulked it back in place or removed it. Time for painting coveralls and a matching hat. I'll need 2 coats of stain blocking primer over this OSB before the final ceiling paint. I started with brushing the primer on all seams and around any electrical boxes. And when that's done, it's time to roll on the rest of the ceiling. The first coat is easy because you can see where you're painting. The second one, it can be hard to see white on white, especially with minimal lighting. I had to set my lights so I could see the wet sheen of the primer on the second rolling. For the final coats, I used a white eggshell latex. I was thinking that it would be easier to brush dust off the ceiling with an eggshell finish rather than the traditional flat finish of a ceiling paint. With the ceiling now done, I can finally install the lighting. I try to use LED lights where I can and when they're affordable. In this workshop, I'll have a mix of both LED and fluorescent tube lights. It's also important for shooting video in this space to have all the lights the same temperature Kelvin. I like 5000 K to work in. For me, it's close to natural light without going too blue. Above the roll-up door, I'm tight for clearance, so I'm installing these 6-inch round LED dimmable lights that fit inside the octagon boxes. Well, they do fit, but it's very tight. A deeper box would have been better, but that's something I didn't know when I was doing the wiring. Let's turn the brake around and see. I was able to get them to fit and snap in place, but then I ran into another problem. The ones I bought and installed did not sit flush with the ceiling. When I checked the clearance of the door, I felt it was just too close. Any play in the door could knock out the lights. It was a disappointment for sure. While I'm pondering what to do about that, I decided to keep going and get the fluorescent tube lights installed. These are pretty standard dual 4-foot tube fixtures. Right now it's about as cheap as you can go. I've installed these same lights in a previous garage, a shed, my shed extension, and the attic of this space. There are no frills and just do the job. When I'm unboxing, I'm checking that the fixture is not dented or damaged, and I'm removing the cling plastic from the ends. Now, I'm not a licensed electrician, but I feel comfortable wiring lights and simple circuits. Do your own research or hire an electrician if this is something that you have no experience with. Electricity can kill you, it's as simple as that. I keep that in mind and work as safely as I can. I use a circuit tester to ensure the wires are dead, even after I turn off the breaker. With some guide marks measured off the wall, I can place the fixture on the ceiling with the hot, neutral, and ground wires fed through the hole. Then I run in some screws to secure the housing to the ceiling. Usually just 2 screws, but this one needed 1 more, closer to the middle. As I talked about earlier, this is one of the advantages to have OSB over drywall on the ceiling. It makes installing anything easier. Then I use wire nuts to connect ground to green, neutral, which is white to white, and hot, black to black. There's a cover plate that has a tab and a screw you install after stuffing the wires up into the box. Now I can clip in the tubes. I find these tubes can take a bit longer than usual to come to full brightness when you first install them. They can have a reddish glow in the center. And I find they can also do this if they're very cold. But for my everyday use, they can get up to full brightness almost immediately, so it's not an issue. Then finally fit the plastic light diffuser into place. So I did find some 6-inch round dimmable LED lights that are ultra thin and more flush mount. They don't need an existing octagon box and come with their own junction box. And their color temperature is also selectable, so I can keep my preference of 5000 K. So I remove the other lights and octagon boxes, and I'll need to cut a larger hole in the ceiling with the circle pattern included in the instructions. And a jigsaw worked well for this, and it looks like I'll have to do some touch-up paint later. There's an orange spring-loaded tab that you pull back and fit into the opening, and the springs snap back to hold the fixture in place. Up in the shop attic, I now need to mount the box that came with the light. I pulled back the insulation and removed the octagon box as earlier. So I'm looking to mount the new junction box right above the light, so I don't need to move any of the existing wires. It's a matter of screwing the box to the ceiling joist, then adding some cable clamps to the knockout holes. Then fishing these wires through them and into the box. Then tightening these clamps and trimming and stripping the wires to the length needed. And I'll use push connectors to join the wires. Then fold them into the box so I can snap the lid closed. After checking that the lights work, I'll put the insulation back. The lights look good, and now there's enough clearance. In the next episode in this shop renovation series, I'll do a treatment to the wall OSB panels and install them. Plus, I'll be staining and finishing boards to go on the east wall. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.